Hi, everybody. Here's Dr. Sophie Acker from Dental Monitoring. And in this podcast, you will hear how technology and artificial intelligence can change your daily life in your practice.
Welcome to another Aligner Insider podcast. Well, hello everybody in podcast land, and welcome back to another Aligner Insider podcast. I am Dean Steinman, President of Ortho Marketing, and to my left is the world famous orthodontist extraordinaire, Dr. Barry Glaser. How are you today, Dr. G?
I'm doing great today, Dean. Thanks for asking. It is the Ides of March.
It is Et
March
tu, Brute.
15th. It's March 15th, 2022. We've got about 50 degrees Fahrenheit outside. So we've got winter on the run and sun shining, birds are chirping. So it's a good day to be alive.
Every day is. Every day is.
Yeah.
So we have a very special guest with us today that we're really excited that's joining us. We've had several other people in her company be guests, and we've had some really great conversations. So today we have with us Sophie Acker, and Sophie is with Dental Monitoring. And anybody in the industry, I'm sure, knows dental monitoring and how they are really game changer for the orthodontic community. Sophie is the Vice President of Product Management and Business Intelligence, and she's located in the wonderful city of Amsterdam. So, Sophie, welcome. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks a lot for having me.
My pleasure. Thanks for joining. So, tell us a little bit about, Sophie Acker. Tell us a little bit about your story and how you came to be at DM, and then obviously we're going to talk today a little bit about technologies, about how things are changing as far as artificial intelligence, about making life easier for providers as well as for the user. But tell us a little bit about Sophie and what you do.
Sure, I'll try to make it really short. So I'm actually a dentist by training, originally, born and raised in Paris. After graduating, I worked in practice for a few years, moved to business school, moved to the corporate world, and never went back to practice. One of the things that made me leave practice is the struggles, the internal struggles I had regarding the fact that running a practice was actually running a business. And that's why I went to business school. And so it's very exciting for me today to actually help alleviate some struggles for the community so that they can really fully enjoy the clinical part of their work.
Wow. And how long have you been with DM for?
I've been 2 years and 2 weeks, very precisely.
Great.
Yes.
So, dental monitoring. They're everywhere as far as what I see for my clients, as far as throughout the industry. And as somebody in the middle of Invisalign treatment, it's a big part of my treatment and my progress moving forward there. So tell us a little bit about where DM is now as far as technologies, as far as the platforms, and what you've seen over the last 6 months that has changed.
Sure. So we started R&D around 7 years ago, right? So it's already a while. We hit the market after a few years. I think what really differentiate us and what's really the core of what we do is integrating artificial intelligence for clinical and technical photo analysis. To really enable the doctor to know what's going on in your mouth as a patient, right? While you're not there, yeah. What's really specific to DM is it's built by doctors for doctors, right? Which really makes it something that is meant to fit really nicely the workflows of the practices, in the sense that we really enable the doctors to focus their time where they think it matters and really synchronize the need for care and the appointment in the practice. Yeah. In regards to what has changed in the last 6 months, I would say what has changed in the world in the last 2 years is is COVID, right? I
Right.
think COVID was a really big hit on the world in general and the orthodontic community, of course, right? And their patient. We saw a rise of interest for all digital technologies that allows doctors to work in a more streamlined and remote way, right? So we of course have seen a rise in interest in dental monitoring as well. And I think those habits will stay. I think if you read articles and listen to blogs about AI in healthcare in general, not only in dentistry but healthcare in general, a lot of experts say that we just won 10 years of digital advancement in 2 years thanks to COVID. Yeah,
Wow.
in a way.
It's incredible. It's always a silver lining, and and it's incredible how many opportunities have arisen and how the world has changed due to COVID, and especially in technology. So Barry, as a provider, how has things? I know I'm on DM, and listen, I love you, but I've seen you in 15, 16 months twice because of this great technology here.
Hmm.
So talk a little bit about how it's changed how technology, especially something like this, has changed your perspective, changed the way you do business, changed your practice.
Yeah, listen, I think as COVID has sort of filtered through the planet and the different phases, now we're still there to some degree, and we're also feeling, these economic impacts. I mean, for my practice as a small businessman, my overhead has basically gone through the roof. Everything that I was paying a flat fee for a long time, everything is more expensive. And when I have the saying, if you're on an island with 1,000 coconut trees, a tree falls over, you don't worry so much. But if you got one coconut tree, you got to really take care of that tree. And
Right.
at a time where the practice is growing and everything's great, I personally didn't think all that much about process. Um, the practice grew. I paid off my student loans. I, bought a house. I raised a family, and it was like, I
Mhm.
didn't really worry about the coconuts too much. And then all of a sudden, your practice gets shut down, and you see this inflation, and my overhead has gone up easily 10%, and in a high tech practice, it's pretty high to begin with. So it makes you stop and look at processes and start to count the pennies. And one of the areas sort of downstream in a process where it can really add up to a big savings is patient visits. And the key, I think, for all these years has been that we felt in the model that we had in orthodontics that as our ethical and professional obligation, we had to see patients on a certain cadence to make sure that their treatment was progressing in a normal way, and that's our obligation and responsibility as practitioners. And I think that maybe to a large extent too, that as artificial intelligence, as technology has developed so rapidly, there's still, I think, Dean and Sophie, I'm sure you hear this all the time, but there's still that thought of like whether it's the Matrix or the Terminator. But in popular culture, Stephen Hawking, Elon Musk have all talked about the end game of how the dangers of artificial intelligence. And I think maybe that doctors are afraid of losing control and wind up being a slave to the technology, right, Sophie? And I think
Yeah.
that, and what I have found is just the opposite. Um, that we maybe we you can touch on this a little bit, but that it's not the AI telling me what to do. It's me directing the AI, and that has enabled me to make little small changes. I mean, let's say if you go for seeing patients every 8 weeks to 10 weeks to 12 weeks to appointments on demand, and I guess that's just a small change. But those
Right.
changes downstream really drop to the bottom line in a way where I'm still in control of patient care. Dean, I still know that you need to floss more, and but seriously, I can still, and if anything, Sophie and Dean, I'm probably more in control of my cases now than ever because of the AI. But I do think, Sophie, that doctors are afraid of losing control. Don't you think?
I totally agree. I think that's a very common question we get from the get go from doctors, we hear about our technology for the first time. And also we need to realize the environment around us, right? AI is discussed in a lot of other areas where it impacts people's life on a daily basis. The way I like to put it is, in the end, AI is your superpower as a doctor, right? It empowers you to actually see your patient more often than you would ever see them in your practice. Because if you scan once a week, I don't know if Dean scans once a week, but you would never go to
Supposed
the
to it.
practice once a week. And Dr. G would never see you in his practice once a week. And in the end, he's got clinical insights on what's going on in your mouth once a week.
Right.
And then, to your point, Dr. G, I think really the fact that the AI, the info that the AI gives is what it is, but you do what you want with it, right? That's really the heart of the product, with the protocols that we've built that enable you to decide what you want to track and what's the consequence of seeing something on the photos, whether it's a message to your staff or your patient. So that's really that articulation between human and technology at the core of the product that is made to empower the practices.
What has you found been the biggest challenge over the last 6 months, as far as implementation goes and mass acceptance of a platform like this? Because I have a very difficult time getting clients to even want to do something like this. We want to be, people want to see us, or somebody, or we don't want any let people book on our website because we want to do it old school ways, and blah blah blah. So, what has been your biggest, challenge for mass acceptance, and how do you overcome that?
So I think there are two steps in the acceptance, as you call it, process that are fundamental. The first one is that doctors and their staff, not only doctors but also their staff, understand the value what the system can bring, and that they hear it not only from people from the company but also, and most importantly, from their peers, right?
Right.
So we do a lot of activities around that. Then I would say the second thing that's very important is to acknowledge from the get go that implementing a digital solution in your practice is work. And it's not a plug and play overnight game, right? And doctors who've already implemented any other digital solution, whether it is an iOS scanner, a digital therapy, aligners or braces, they've been through that already, so they know, right? And this is a practice work, not just a doctor work. The staff need to understand the value, be excited about implementing this. And us as a company put a lot of effort in supporting practices along the first 3 to 6 months, depending on practices, to really integrate the system into their workflow. I think that's really the steps that are fundamental.
So, Barry, how hard is it? How hard was it for you to implement this? I'm sure when in the infancy, you were like, "Oh boy, here's another something I have to try to try, and this and that, and new technology." Um, how what crossed your mind before, while you were looking into this, and what crosses your mind when you look at any new technology that claims to be a game changer?
Yeah, look, there's always some level, I mean, more than warranted, I suppose, of anxiety, when you make a change to your business. And I mean, looking back, most of that anxiety was just wasted worry. I don't know why it is that we get so worried about these. Like, we make all these changes. I made all these changes in my practice all over the years, and the sun still rises in the east. It's like, I don't know why I worry about this kind of stuff, but there is always apprehension as far as whether the staff is going to accept it, whether it's going to work, whether it's going to be worth money, and whether there's going to be that value. But having said that, I think that this incorporating DM into the practice, which is now going on close to 3 years, honestly, it was probably one of the easiest moves that we ever made. My staff already understands the value of digital workflows. They love the scanner. They love what we do with clear aligner therapy and all that kind of stuff. So it wasn't really a hard sell to my staff, for them to have an easier day, which is pretty much what it is. Being able to sit and run a virtual clinic, sitting with maybe a cup of coffee, looking at a computer screen versus having the treadmill. I mean, orthodontic practices. I mean, I happen to have smaller, boutique type practices. But there are practices out there, Dean, that see over 100 patients a day, 120, 150 patients a day, and that's, I mean, you're just like a little hamster on a wheel. And you do it all day long, and you go to sleep, and you get the next day, and you do it again. And I think that the flip side of why it's worth maybe some of the anxiety is that you can make your quality of life better for you, your staff, and your patients all at the same time, and grow your practice all at the same time. And that's why, and my staff got that. So we got the training. The training is quite straightforward. The dashboard, which has been upgraded, I don't know, dozens and dozens of times, improved since I first got it. But dashboard's super easy to navigate. Now, actually, I can access just the other day. I can access all my patients right on my phone, which is really groovy, Sophie. So thank you for that. But it's a very very easy process. I here's so basically just as advice, and then we'll get back to Sophie. I know this is her interview, but what we did initially was we added 15 minutes on to a new patient start appointment. And that was the 15 minutes extra for my staff to get used to giving DM instructions and training the patients to do their scan box and taking their first scan. We've actually taken that away because honestly, the app, the patients sit and watch the tutorial on the app. I mean, it doesn't really require any staff time. And then the staff just assists in taking the scan. So maybe it takes a couple of extra minutes, but super easy to integrate. We just decided to jump in and get all our patients on it. And I mean, really, I'm trying to think if there were really any snags. You always have questions the first couple of weeks, but listen, the hardest thing that I've ever done in my office, I think, is change practice management systems, which is just a nightmare that goes on for months. And there was none of that. A couple of days of maybe having some questions, and then you get it. So it's very intuitive, very easy to use, and on top of everything else, the patients absolutely love it. Sophie, it's funny because I get this all the time. My doctors, like as Dean mentioned, doctors say, "Well, my patients love to come to the office to see us," and
No, they don't.
they don't. They don't love the appointment. They love the doctor. I mean, they do. I mean, but they don't love the appointment. I mean, and you know that, right? I mean, I know you have data that backs that up too. So how do you? So that would be, let's say, the skeptic. I'm not one of those, but the skeptic would say, "I'm going to spend money for the service. The patients are. I'm going to lower my patient satisfaction because now they're not seeing us as much." And what have you found in all the clients that you have, Sophie?
So I have to say, more often than not, that's one of the big hurdle, together with the fright of losing control that you were mentioning earlier. I think again the best is to hear from peers that have been through the same, that it might not be correct actually, and then as soon as they start just discussing with a few patients about the opportunity of it, and then very quickly they understand that actually patients see it as a massive benefit rather than a hurdle.
Yeah. It's a very very easy workflow. There's just not a lot of steps to learn. You train your training my dental monitoring coordinator probably took a week, and Dean and we were off and running. So it was, we saw the value right away. I have a secret, Sophie. So when I actually signed on as DM, I said to myself, I'm going to do 10 cases. Because, at the time, I don't know if it's changed, but there wasn't, other than, let's say, the small fee for training, there wasn't really any like ongoing costs. Like I could do a few cases, and if I didn't like it, I could bail out. And that was kind of my mindset. I'm going to do 10 cases, and then I'm going to sit down and evaluate it. And we just never stopped adding patients. So it was really,
Yeah, that's a very common behavior, I have to say, for doctors who are trying something new. It's, I'm just going to try a bit and I'll see. But yeah, very often we see that he tramp ups quickly as soon as they're trained, basically.
yeah. So a super super simple process.
So let's talk a little bit about the technology as far as the AI, because AI is everywhere now. Every single company out there is trying to make different AIs, from content to this to that. So talk to us a little bit about the AI. What's the driving force behind it, and how are you adapting it? Because I'm sure that it's different now than it was a year ago, and 2 years ago, and 3 years ago. So talk a little bit about AI in the ortho world, and as I said, what who's behind it? Who's driving that ship there? It's not. Hopefully, it's not like Terminator and the computers are driving the world. Hopefully, there's somebody there. So talk a little bit about the background of it.
Yes, absolutely. I think one of the key concepts to understand when it comes to image analysis is there are two big types, I would say, of AI. There are the technical networks that allow to reposition photos, crop them properly, and things like that to present it to our customers or patient in a neat way. And there is the clinical AI that allows to detect clinical insights, going from the class 1, 2, 3, or the presence of gingivitis, or the fact the arch wire is passive, or we have more than 130 of them, so I'm not going to make a full list right now. Just a few examples, but I think the second thing that people tend to not fully realize, because we talk a lot about AI in the world, but we don't often take the time to explain people how it's built, is that if you want to detect a gingivitis, you actually have to teach the computer to do so, right? So you
Right.
actually give the computer a set of photos where humans, clinicians, obviously in that case, have said here there is and here there is not gingivitis on each photo, so the computer can learn, right?
Right.
And because it can repeat that task 100,000 times very fast, the computer becomes very quickly very efficient in assessing something that can take years for a
Mm.
human to do, right? Just
Right.
because it's like you would see 100,000 patients in a day, right? How much would you learn? Yeah. um, so I mean, there is magic in AI in the way the computer learns from what we put into it, right? But they don't learn by magic how to identify a gingivitis or identify an arch virus passive. They are trained by specialists, and that's why I always say it's made by doctors for doctors. It's because in the end, there is a whole bunch of doctors internally who do two things. First, they discuss and they decide what would make sense now to bring as added value to the doctors. What don't we have yet that the doctors would value to have? So, for example, 9 months ago, we launched the Archwire Passivity based on photos, which we had previously based on STL files. And we developed the ability to assess it on photos. So, to really enable doctors to get the same value out of their braces monitoring versus their aligner monitoring. Yeah, so that's the first thing. We talk to doctors. There are doctors internally. We talk to doctors and we assess. Okay, there is a need to improve this or develop this that we don't have, and then and then we do it, and it's all done by clinicians, right? And then of course there is magic in the computer that learns very fast how to do things, but it learns to do what clinicians can do in a way, right?
Right.
I hope it demystifies a bit.
Um, so, talk a little bit about the overall um, business and how it's changing the orthodontic world. As far as making, so Barry mentioned before that it makes you a lot more efficient and effective. Makes the end user, for me, very happy. So I don't have to go. I'd love to see you, but I'm busy. And imagine a mom who's got 2, 3, 4 kids who doesn't have to go now. So do you have any type of numbers that somebody who's on the fence, who's thinking of finally jumping into the technology, you know, um, SaaS platform here, or just adapting technology for their practice, how it's a game changer for them, and how practices who are offering virtual consultations and virtual follow-ups, and using and bracing technology, are really far ahead as far as bringing in new patients from a marketing perspective. People who, for every one of my clients, the number one way that they get new patients is the internet. All right, across the board, everyone. So anybody that has a differentiator and makes themselves stand out from the competition is going to be potentially the winner. So
Yeah.
what have you found from DM standpoint, um, how this translates into a better practice, more efficient practice, and how the practice makes more money?
Sure. So actually, it's really interesting you talk about the how patient arrives to the practice, right? Because that's also something we have developed in another product that dental monitoring, which is called SmileMate, which is the ability to screen patients before they come on the chair for the first time. So you can have AI based again a pre-assessment of the patient condition, which first really creates engagement for the patient before it comes to the practice, which emotionally creates a big difference and facilitates closing in the practice, and also really helps the practice streamline their workflow when it comes to the first consult, right? Some practice even moved to virtual first consults.
Right.
But even if you keep your physical first consult, you have already a certain level of information where you already know, okay, this patient is or not a potential patient for this or that type of treatment.
All right. And do you have any type of numbers across the board which can back up the fact that when a practice does adapt to technologies and does adapt to something like artificial intelligence and follow-ups, how it is bringing in more patients and making the practice more effective? Or Barry, you could jump anytime as well, as far as you, because you probably, I know you work less time now, and you have put in and but seeing more patients or being able to give them better results. So, but between the two of you guys, can you let me know a little bit as far as something to share to the orthodontic world, that if you don't jump on this, you're missing out.
Sophie, you want to go first?
Um, so it's a quite a difficult question to answer from my perspective, not running my own practice, right? Because it really depends of what the doctors wants to do with it. To your point, Dean, I think you can make the decision to, because you have less visits, you're gonna have less days of work in a week and more time for whatever activities you'd like, whether it's a family or golfing.
Right.
Or you can decide that you have less visits, but you're going to see more patient and you're going to generate more revenue. And that's really a cut each practitioner needs to make for him or herself.
Yeah, there was a study, and I don't have the numbers in front of me, Dean, but maybe we can publish them on the Facebook page. But there was a study done by Grant Duncan, one of the first DM users in Australia, and he did a extensive study on 100 consecutive patients, looking at appointments, a number of assistant visits, doctor visits, with DM and without, and just suffice to say at this point that there were significant time savings and significant reduction in the number of appointments, treatment time, number of refinements. But I'll get that data, and we'll put that up on the Facebook group. But it's been documented, and from a seat of the pants, I haven't done a study, but from a seat of the pants um, assessment for my own practice, I know that the number of patients that I see per day has gone down significantly. I've eliminated a day and a half per week of face-to-face practice with the patients. Um, so yeah, and actually we had a nice growth last year. We had 20% revenue growth. So being able to work less days, growing revenue, is that makes a small businessman very happy.
Sure. So in closing here, Sophie, what advice would you put out to the community for anybody that is on the fence, thinking about joining the technology world, adapting their practice? What would you say to them as far as from a expert standpoint, from being a dentist as well as working for a DM there? What should they be doing? What could somebody do today, or what's one thing that practice should know?
I think the main thing is to fully understand the value and what it's going to bring to you and your practice before you jump on. And if you're not convinced, just go and find a practitioner who already uses the product. To hear it from the mouth of a peer is probably the best advice I could give to someone who is in doubt of starting. Then for doctors who jumped and are just starting, I would say, and I think going back to what Barry was saying earlier, um, I don't think the best way to start is to stop at 10 patients, because you will not see the full benefit of the solution until you do a little bit more than that, right?
No
So
question.
I think if you decide to go, you really need to give it a go and achieve a much more patient than 10 to really be able to see for yourself where the benefits are going to be for your practice.
Yeah,
That
and
resonates,
I
Barry,
couldn't
the
agree
same?
more. Yeah, I didn't want to make that as a suggestion that maybe that's what doctors could do. It would be the same thing. Say, well, I'm going to do 10 light force cases, or I'm going to do 10 aligner cases, and then see. And it's just way, it's not enough to have that sort of impact um, on your overall practice. So yeah, I think that jump in and go for it. But yeah, and there's plenty of places to get education too. So
There are.
yeah.
Yeah, great. And Barry, if you had to, give one bit of advice to somebody, because you are obviously an embracer of it and user, and as am I, from the consumer standpoint, what's one thing you would say to somebody that you know needs to wants to think about it, or is just practice is hurting and they see they're losing patients? What's one bit of advice you could give to them today?
So when I think a lot of people are looking forward to the AAO meeting annual session that's coming up in Miami. I know you're going too, but Dean, you've been there, and Sophie, you too. And there's what 1,500 vendors, 2,500 vendors. There's a lot of vendors, and
Right.
and as a doctor, you walk into that room and you kind of feel like it's like a a bazaar. Like you feel like who's going to want to suck the money out of my wallet first, and I get that feeling. Having said that, I think the first booth that you should stop at is at dental monitoring. I mean, I've done, an analysis. There's lots of companies that have come and gone, and dental monitoring is not one of them. They're here to stay, and I think that it's the first place you should put on your list at the AO meeting. It's the first place that you should go. There are always seminars in the conference rooms as well to support DM, but go speak to them and try it. I mean, it's really I think that it's to me, there's been a few. This is more than just one word, I suppose, but there's been a few, major game changers in my practice, and DM is certainly at the top of the list. So don't hesitate, but learn more about it and give it a try.
Perfect. Great. Sophie, Acker, thanks so much for joining us. I really appreciate it. Ari, thanks so much for the insight. Anybody out there, please let us know if you have any questions. You'll see some more information on our Facebook page and in our groups to go over some stats here and some numbers. And, if anybody wants more information, just message us, reach out to us, and we'll gladly make an introduction and help bring dental monitoring into your office and to offer and walk you through different platforms that are available across the board. You have to adapt your practice, adapt or die, guys. I've mentioned it many, many times, and we're going to keep saying it until our heads explode. So, so jump on in. And as Barry said, at AAO, please, if you're gonna, well, I'll be there. Dr. Glaser will be
We'll be
there.
doing some podcasts, so
Tomorrow,
maybe
Israel.
jump in. You can
Exactly.
join the
Yep.
podcast.
Reach out to us. We'd love to have you as a guest as well.
I'll be there as well.
Ah,
Great. So,
fantastic.
it'll be one big party. So, everybody, look forward to it. Miami's going to be even more happening place come in May 2022. So, Sophie, thanks so much for joining us again. Everybody in podcast land, thank you so much for listening. Be safe, enjoy, and let's go Mets. Okay. Thanks, everybody. Bye bye.